He started a 3-month killing spree that would send Ukraine into turmoil.
In the depths of Ukraine, a rather ominous individual emerged onto the scene, striking fear into the hearts of all who crossed his path. This man possessed a dark and foreboding aura, which earned him the rather unsettling moniker. His gaze pierced through the shadows, and whenever he appeared, an unsettling hush fell over the place. The wind howled, the trees creaked, and an eerie silence descended upon the landscape. His presence seemed to suck the light right out of the world, leaving nothing but a sense of impending doom. His true nature remained a mystery, but one thing was certain: death was always at his heels, and his legacy was forever tainted with blood. In the quaint village of 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐿, nestled in the picturesque Zhytomyr Oblast, a young boy named Anatoly Onoprienko was born on July 25, 1959. His early life had been marked by a poignant family tragedy when his mother had passed away, leaving him and his older brother Valentin under the care of their father Yuri. As Yuri had struggled to come to terms with the loss of his wife, Anatoly's life had taken a dramatic turn. He had been placed in an orphanage, a pivotal moment that had shaped his worldview and influenced his future decisions. The experience had left an indelible mark on his life, forever changing the course of his destiny. As Anatoly had navigated the challenges of life in the orphanage, he had begun to feel like a forgotten soul. The world around him had seemed indifferent to his existence, intensifying his feelings of abandonment and rejection. Yet, this sense of isolation had also cultivated a deep empathy within him for others who had experienced similar hardships. The harsh realities of life in the orphanage had forced Anatoly to confront the darker aspects of human nature. He had witnessed firsthand the cruel treatment of the other children, the meager rations, and the lack of warmth and compassion. These experiences had left an indelible mark on his psyche, shaping his worldview and informing his future decisions. Despite the bleakness of his surroundings, Anatoly had found solace in the quiet moments of contemplation. He had spent hours lost in thought, reflecting on the injustices of the world and the suffering of those around him. This introspection had fostered a sense of resilience within him, a determination to rise above the adversity that had defined his early life. Anatoly's life experiences had set him on a path, leading him to make choices that had far-reaching consequences. Unbeknownst to him, a dramatic shift had been on the horizon, one that had forever altered the trajectory of his life. The shadows of his past had loomed large, casting a foreboding presence over his future and setting the stage for the events that were to come. As the pieces of his life had begun to fall into place, Anatoly had stood at the threshold of a new chapter, one that had tested his resolve and shaped his future. A sense of unease settled over the Ukrainian countryside in the summer of 1989. The peaceful atmosphere was disrupted by the emergence of a mysterious and ominous figure. Anatoly Onoprienko, a name that would soon become synonymous with fear, commenced his sinister campaign. On the fateful evening of June 14, 1989, the lives of Oleg and Lyudmila Melnik intersected with Onoprienko in a devastating encounter. The unsuspecting couple were halted, sealing their fate. Onoprienko's actions that evening had a profound impact on the lives of those around him. Lyudmila's desperate cries for help were swiftly silenced, and the couple's remains were hastily concealed. Their possessions were taken, and their vehicle was destroyed. Less than a month later, on July 16th, Onoprienko struck again, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. Viktor and Anna Wasyliak, a Polish couple, fell victim to his relentless actions. Their lives were tragically cut short, their belongings plundered, and their car reduced to ruins. The once peaceful Ukrainian countryside had transformed into a domain of fear, where a calculating and merciless individual roamed unchecked, casting a dark shadow over the lives of those around him. Before we dive into the more details of these heinous crimes, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us. August 16th marked the day when an unsuspecting family's life took a devastating turn. Yevgeny Podolyak, a devoted family man, was driving along a serene road when his path unexpectedly crossed with that of Onoprienko. The sudden knock on the window shattered the peaceful atmosphere, and Yevgeny found himself face to face with a menacing figure. In that instant, Yevgeny's instincts kicked in, prompting him to react. However, the situation escalated rapidly, and Yevgeny's life was forever altered. The tranquility of the scene was replaced by an atmosphere of terror, as Onoprienko's actions sent shockwaves through the air. Yevgeny's loved ones were caught in the midst of the chaos, and their fate was sealed. As the chaos unfolded, Yevgeny's mind was filled with a sense of desperation and helplessness. He was frozen in time, unable to move or react as the events around him spiraled out of control. The sounds of panic and fear filled the air, and Yevgeny's heart was heavy with the knowledge that he was powerless to stop the tragedy that was unfolding. The aftermath of the chaos was marked by an eerie silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath in shock and horror. Yevgeny's loved ones were gone, taken from him in an instant by the brutal actions of Onoprienko. The trauma of that moment would stay with Yevgeny forever, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of violence. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, Yevgeny was consumed by a sense of grief and anger. He was torn apart by the loss of those he held dear, and his heart was filled with a deep-seated desire for justice. The memory of that fateful day would haunt him for the rest of his life, a constant reminder of the devastating impact of Onoprienko's actions. As the minutes ticked by, Onoprienko remained at the scene, surrounded by the devastating consequences of his actions. The weight of his deeds began to bear down upon him, leading him to contemplate a desperate course of action. Yet, the darkness that drove him forward refused to be silenced. As the situation became increasingly unbearable, Onoprienko took drastic measures, ensuring that the scene was left in a state of utter desolation. The car, which had once symbolized familial love and unity, was transformed into a haunting monument to the tragedy that had unfolded. Meanwhile, Onoprienko, the mastermind behind the horror, vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of devastation that forever changed the lives of those affected. October 5, 1995, marked a fateful day that forever changed the lives of two innocent individuals. Alexander Svetlovsky, a jewelry vendor, had been in the midst of a transaction with 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿 inside a vehicle. The atmosphere had been serene, with no indication of the impending catastrophe. The sun had been shining brightly, casting a warm glow over the scene, and a gentle breeze had rustled the leaves of the nearby trees. The sound of birds chirping and the distant hum of traffic had filled the air, creating a sense of tranquility that had been shattered in an instant. As the transaction had been taking place, a figure had emerged from the shadows, his presence unnoticed by the two individuals. Anatoly Onoprienko, a name that would soon become synonymous with terror, had been watching and waiting, his eyes fixed intently on the unsuspecting pair. The serenity of the moment had been short-lived, as Onoprienko's actions would soon unleash a horror beyond comprehension. Suddenly, a figure emerged, shattering the tranquility of the moment. Onoprienko's deliberate approach sent a chill through the air, his intentions unmistakable. The tension mounted as his demeanor shifted, revealing a sinister intent. In an instant, the stillness was broken, and 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿's life was tragically cut short. Alexander Svetlovsky soon met a similar fate, as Onoprienko's actions sealed their destinies. As the chaos subsided, Onoprienko's true motives became clear. He commandeered the vehicle and fled the scene of devastation. What had once been a symbol of innocence had become an instrument of destruction. Onoprienko drove the car to a nearby forest, where a catastrophic event unfolded, utilizing a gas cylinder stored in the trunk. The vehicle was obliterated, consumed by flames that left nothing but remnants. As the darkness closed in, Onoprienko vanished into the night, his pockets heavy with the spoils of his heinous act. October 28, 1995, was a day that would be etched in the memories of those who had known Maria Parashchuk. It had begun like any other day, but would ultimately end in tragedy. Maria's return to her apartment had proved to be a fateful decision, one that would change the course of her life forever. As Maria had entered her residence, she had been met with a scene that would leave her reeling. Onoprienko, a figure with sinister intentions, had been rummaging through her belongings. The air had been thick with tension as Maria had realized she was in grave danger. Her heart had been racing, and she had struggled to comprehend the horror unfolding before her eyes. In a desperate bid to conceal his actions, Onoprienko's behavior had become increasingly erratic. The situation had spiraled out of control, culminating in a catastrophic event that had claimed Maria's life. As the full extent of the tragedy had become clear, the lives of those who had known Maria had been forever changed. The true nature of Onoprienko's actions had been revealed, leaving a lasting impact on all those affected. December 24, 1995, was a day that would forever be etched in the annals of time. The 𝐦𝐮𝐬𝐿 family, unaware of the impending doom, had been going about their evening routine, oblivious to the horror that was about to unfold. As the night wore on, a sense of unease had settled over the household. The family's peaceful evening had been shattered by the sudden arrival of an uninvited guest. Onoprienko, a figure with a sinister presence, had invaded their home, bringing with him an aura of malevolence. The family's lives had been forever changed as Onoprienko's true intentions had become clear. The father, a helpless bystander, had been the first to fall victim to Onoprienko's sinister plans. The sound of a single gunshot had echoed through the night, leaving the family in a state of shock and terror. The mother, frozen in horror, had watched in disbelief as her husband's life had slipped away. The children, confused and frightened, had clung to each other in desperation, their young minds struggling to comprehend the brutality of the scene unfolding before them. The air had been thick with the smell of smoke and blood, and the sound of the father's labored breathing had been the only sound that had broken the stunned silence. As the reality of the situation had begun to sink in, the mother had found the strength to react, her maternal instincts kicking in as she had desperately tried to shield her children from the horror of their father's murder. But Onoprienko had been relentless, his actions driven by a twisted and sinister motivation that had left the family with no escape from his brutal wrath. The night had been forever etched in their memories, a haunting reminder of the terror and trauma that they had endured at the hands of Anatoly Onoprienko. As the mother had struggled to come to terms with the unfolding tragedy, she too had fallen prey to Onoprienko's evil intentions. The family's home, once a sanctuary of love and warmth, had been transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. Onoprienko's greed and malice had known no bounds. As he had rummaged through the family's belongings, he had stumbled upon two children, peacefully asleep. Their innocence had proved no match for Onoprienko's depravity, and he had callously ended their lives. In a twisted act of cruelty, Onoprienko had carefully positioned the youngest child upon the mother's chest, creating a haunting tableau of his atrocities. As he had fled the scene, he had taken with him a bag of used clothing, a grim reminder of his heinous crimes. In a final act of destruction, he had ignited the house, utilizing a gas cylinder to erase any trace of the 𝐦𝐮𝐭 family's existence. January 2nd, 1996, dawned with promise for the 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐿 family. Piotr and Maria had been busily arranging their new residence, their hands working in harmony as they meticulously hung curtains. However, their moment of domestic tranquility proved fleeting. Unbeknownst to them, a sinister presence had been lurking nearby, observing their every move. As the day wore on, an eerie sense of unease settled over the household. It was as if an uninvited guest had slipped into their lives, casting a dark shadow over their happiness. Onoprienko, a figure with a menacing aura, had become fixated on the unsuspecting couple. With calculated precision, Onoprienko had infiltrated their home, his movements as silent as a whisper. Piotr, unaware of the impending threat, had been the first to fall victim to Onoprienko's sinister plans. A sudden, deafening sound had shattered the stillness, leaving the family in a state of shock and terror. Maria, driven by instinct, had rushed to her husband's side, but Onoprienko's malevolence had known no bounds. He had struck again, plunging the family into unimaginable darkness. The horror had not ceased there. Lesia, Maria's sister, had been cowering beneath the kitchen table, her heart racing with fear. Onoprienko's gaze had fallen upon her, and he had tightened his grip, his intentions clear. A sudden, deadly sound had rung out, abruptly ending Lesia's life. Miroslava, another sister, had sought refuge in the shadows, hoping to evade the nightmare. Yet Onoprienko's relentless pursuit had been merciless, and he had found her with chilling efficiency. A second devastating sound had reverberated through the home, extinguishing Miroslava's life as well. As Onoprienko had ignited the house, he had caught sight of a potential witness, Mikhail Malinowski, who had stood frozen in horror. Without a moment's hesitation, Onoprienko had ensured that the witness would never reveal the truth. The residence, once a beacon of hope and fresh starts, had been reduced to smoldering ruins, a stark reminder of Onoprienko's heinous actions. January 5th, 1996, was a day that would forever be etched in the memories of those who lived through it. The tranquility of the night was shattered by the sinister actions of Onoprienko, who had been lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. His unsuspecting victims, Sergei Odintsov and Tamara Dolinin, had been going about their evening, unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. But Onoprienko had other plans, and his intentions had been far from pure. As the night wore on, a sense of unease had settled over the area. It had been as if a dark cloud had descended, casting a shadow over the lives of those who lived there. And then, without warning, the unthinkable had happened. Onoprienko had struck, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. The lives of Odintsov and Dolinin had been forever changed, and the community had been left to pick up the pieces. But Onoprienko's actions had not gone unnoticed. As he had attempted to flee the scene, he had encountered police officer 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐷𝐿, accompanied by Sergei Garmash. The consequences of his actions had been about to catch up with him. Yet, fate had had more in store. Onoprienko's path of destruction had continued, leaving a trail of heartbreak and despair in its wake. The lives of Viktor Kasayev, a soldier, and Anatoly Savitsky, a driver, had also been forever changed by Onoprienko's actions. As the night had drawn to a close, the true extent of Onoprienko's destruction had become clear. The community had been left to mourn the loss of innocent lives, and the memory of that fateful night would haunt them for years to come. January 17th, 1996, was a day that would be forever etched in the memories of those who had lived in the isolated home. The tranquility of the evening had been shattered by the sound of splintering wood, as Onoprienko had forced his way into the house. Vladimir Pilat, a pensioner who had been living in the house, had been awoken by the noise and had gone to investigate. But as he had approached the source of the sound, his life had taken a devastating turn. Onoprienko, who had been lurking in the shadows, had confronted Pilat, making a demand that would ultimately prove fatal. Pilat's refusal to comply had sealed his fate, and Onoprienko's actions had taken a deadly turn. The events that unfolded next would have a profound impact on the community, leaving a lasting legacy of fear and tragedy. Onoprienko's actions had been calculated and deliberate, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. The lives of Pilat's family members had been forever changed, and the community had never been the same. As the night had worn on, the true extent of Onoprienko's actions had become clear. The isolated home, once a peaceful sanctuary, had been transformed into a scene of utter devastation. The community had been left to grapple with the aftermath, trying to make sense of the senseless. The darkness of that fateful night had haunted the community for years to come, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of Onoprienko's actions. January 30th, 1996, was a day that would be etched in the memories of those who had known the Marusina family. It had begun like any other day, but had ended in a tragedy that had shaken the community. The Marusina family, a loving and close-knit unit, had been going about their daily routine, unaware of the horror that was to come. As the evening drew in, Onoprienko had emerged from the shadows, his sinister intentions clear. Sergei Zagranichny had stopped by the Marusina residence, unaware of the horror that was to come. Meanwhile, Onoprienko had been watching and waiting, his patience having worn thin. He had been stalking the family for some time, studying their every move and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As Sergei entered the house, Onoprienko saw his chance and began to put his sinister plan into action. As the evening had drawn in, Onoprienko's actions had become more deliberate. He had emerged from the shadows, his eyes fixed on his targets. With a calculated calmness, he had carried out his sinister plan, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. The events that had unfolded next had changed the lives of those involved forever. Zagranichny and one of the boys had struggled to survive, but Onoprienko's actions had been relentless. He had shown no mercy, and his cruelty had known no bounds. The Marusina household, once a place of warmth and laughter, had been transformed into a scene of unimaginable tragedy. The lives of innocent people had been lost, leaving a legacy of sorrow and devastation that had haunted the community for years to come. Onoprienko's actions had become increasingly erratic and sinister, culminating in a rampage that had exhibited no signs of slowing down. The devastating legacy of death and destruction he had left behind would haunt the community for years to come. February 26, 1996, had marked a day that would remain forever etched in the memories of Viktor Gudz's family and friends. The ambulance driver had been going about his routine when he had encountered Onoprienko, who had made a demand that had proved to be fatal. Gudz's refusal had ultimately cost him his life, as Onoprienko's actions had taken a deadly turn. As the days had passed, the community had held its breath, wondering when Onoprienko would strike again. And then, on March 22nd, the unthinkable had happened. Onoprienko had targeted the Novosad family, bringing an end to their lives in a tragic and devastating manner. The most shocking act had been yet to come. Onoprienko's actions had taken a dark and sinister turn, as he had turned his attention to the young daughter of the Novosad family. The outcome had been heartbreaking, as the family's lives had been forever changed. As the house had been engulfed in flames, Onoprienko had disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable tragedy. The lives of the Novosad family had been abruptly ended, their memory forever marred by the horrific actions of Anatoly Onoprienko. Trail. A sense of relief had washed over the community on April 16th, 1996, as the authorities had finally apprehended Onoprienko. The discovery of his hidden arsenal had been the turning point, leading to his long-awaited arrest.
Совершенно необычное и очень яркое.
Считаю, что Оноприенко каким-либо психическим заболеванием, которым относятся инкриминируемые ему деяния, не страдал. По своему психическому состоянию мог осознавать свои действия и руководить ими.
As news of his capture had spread, the community had collectively breathed a sigh of relief. However, the justice system had had a surprise in store. Onoprienko had narrowly avoided the most severe penalty thanks to a change in legislation during his incarceration. Instead, he had received a life sentence, a punishment that many had felt was not sufficient. As time had passed, Onoprienko's case had gradually faded from the public eye, but the impact of his actions had continued to be felt. The community had remained on edge, anxious about the possibility of his release. Many had felt that he should have remained behind bars for life, and the prospect of his parole had sparked widespread concern. In the end, fate had intervened, bringing Onoprienko's life to a close. He had passed away on August 24, 2013, at the age of 54, due to heart failure. While his death had brought a sense of closure to the community, the memories of his past actions had never been fully erased. Conclusion. The shadows of a nation's collective memory, a figure had emerged, leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of society. Anatoly Onoprienko's legacy had been a somber reminder of the darkest aspects of human nature, a testament to the profound malevolence that had driven him to commit acts of unimaginable harm. As the years had passed, his name had become synonymous with fear, evoking a sense of dread that had seemed to seep into the very marrow of those who had heard it. It had been as if the mere mention of his name had had the power to conjure up a sense of foreboding, a feeling that something had been terribly wrong. Thank you for watching. If you found this video thought-provoking, please consider subscribing for more content. Share with your friends and family to spark meaningful conversations. Your support means the world.